winners and losers have the same goals. So what really differentiates those that are successful and those that are not? You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the levels of your systems. Most of us attribute these big successes and these big wins to these big monumental changes. And oftentimes that's not the case. Just because you have a goal of 7 figures doesn't mean you're the person who you need to be to have a 7-figure business. Becoming the identity of the person you want is not about affirmations. It's about giving yourself evidence via action. You cannot change a habit that you do not notice. When you miss something once, it can be an accident. If you miss it twice, it's actually the start of a new habit. Hello and welcome back to Ambitious. Today, we are actually doing something that I've never done in the history of the podcast, which is I'm going to be talking to you about another podcast that I actually listened to twice because I found it to be such a compelling conversation. And I'm going to link for today's purpose the entire podcast if you want to go listen to it in the show notes for you, because I want to use today's episode to summarize what was discussed and most importantly, what my biggest takeaways were, especially for you if you are somebody as a business owner who is looking to really master how to create not just short-term, but long-term change in a simple, effective, and sustainable way. And this was a podcast that was entirely dedicated to talking about understanding of behavior change, understanding of habits, understanding of why we do what we do and get into the patterns that we do. And I want to first give credit where credit is due. If you are somebody who has ever read the book Atomic Habits, what I'm going to share today are some of the insights that I have learned from James Clear, who had that book Atomic Habits come out in 2018. So think of today as your short, summarized masterclass if you are somebody that wants to create change in any area of your life. This can be in your health, it could be in your relationship, it could be in your business. Maybe it's even just with yourself. Maybe you're thinking, okay, I just want to start to get up earlier in the morning, or I want to get to bed earlier at night. Whatever the thing may be, today we're going to talk about what actually could be blocking you from creating that habit change and from creating that behavioral change, and what actually you need to do today, tonight, tomorrow to actually start to see change in the areas that you're looking for it. So without further ado, let's get into today's episode. So one of the things that I will say is that, and this is something that I've talked to clients about over and over and over, is the fact that most of the changes that you're wanting to see within your life and also within your business are not often things that are a matter of revamping your entire life, your entire business, starting over from scratch and implementing this whole new plan. One of the things that I talk about is the compound effect. And the compound effect, by the way, also is a fantastic book. So if you have not read the compound effect, also a great read. But the compound effect basically speaks to the fact that if we think about yourself standing on a baseline. If I am to think about getting 1% better, so an analogy that they use for this and to explain the exact same principle is like an airplane. If I tilt the airplane's direction by 1% off of where it was supposed to be as straight, so if I'm trying to have this airplane fly straight and I tilt it to the left 1%, it could take me in an entirely different direction within 2 hours. On the contrast, if I'm that plane and I'm straight and I tilt it to the right, it can take me in the total right direction after 2 hours. This is the same thing as you with your habits in your business. Most of us attribute these big monumental changes in our business and these big successes and these big wins to be attributed to these big monumental changes. And oftentimes that's not the case. There's these tiny little tweaks and refinements that when we make that little 1% change, for you, it might be the 1% change in your close rate, the 1% change in your marketing, the 1% change in your habits each morning, the 1% change in your mindset, in your leadership. When you make those 1% changes, over time, you compound, and day after day after day with those reps, you could be in an entirely different place in the next 6 months, in the next year. And the 1% is really what Atomic Habits talks about. It talks about the small but the powerful moves that we can make that over time allow us to see our life and our goals go in a very different direction. And so I was just like so refreshed hearing this podcast because obviously I read the book years ago, but when I heard the podcast, it kind of brought it all back up for me and it made me reflect on what this looks like in business. And I want to invite you right now to ask yourself, what is something maybe in your business, in your life, in a certain area of growth or a goal that you have, what is something that you really deeply desire change in? And as we go through today's episode, I want you to anchor onto that. Okay. So just take a second right now and think to yourself, what is a goal that I have? So for me, one of my goals that I will use for today is actually health related. It's less of a business one. I feel like I've mastered a lot of the habits of business. One of the things that I really struggled with and have always struggled with is consistency with my health. What I mean by that is eating the right kinds of protein basically every day and having a protein target. I'm a carb girly, so because of that, I tend to lean toward the rice and the bread and all of that. 2, I'm really focused on hitting a step goal every single day. And 3, also getting in X amount of workouts each week. So those are kind of like my 3 core needle movers when it comes to my health. And even though those are very straightforward and simple, they are something that I will tell you I have drastically struggled with for a very long time. And so it's interesting because this is the first time since I was really, really fit, probably, to be honest, like 7, 8 years ago when I was super into fitness and did fitness coaching. When I left that, I feel like I kind of left the habits as well. And so I have struggled since that point to really find out what the new baseline looks like for me. So when I listened to this episode, it kind of brought up for me the fact of why I'm now starting to feel a lot of momentum when it comes to my workouts, when it comes to my health. And that's because I really started to see, wow, I am doing some of these principles. And I wanted to share some of that with you and also give you this insight when it comes to your business. So basically, the book Atomic Habits talks about the fact and it argues that success is not about radical change or motivation or setting massive goals. It's actually about building better systems that make good behaviors easier and bad behaviors difficult. I want to just repeat that really quick so you can let this land. Success isn't about radical change, motivation, or setting huge goals. It's about building better systems that make good behaviors easier and bad behaviors difficult. And when I even just heard that line, it really got me reflecting on business because I obviously work with business owners of all different sizes every single day. And with that, I often realize that, person A and person B can both set their target for 500,000 next year. They can both set their target for a million or 2 million. But then most of us wonder, well, what is the difference factor? What is the thing that allows person A to be successful, but person B to stay stuck? And goals, I wouldn't say are the difference of us being successful at the things that we want to achieve in life. Everyone and their mom can set a goal. So, what really differentiates those that are successful and those that are not? And so, some people, yes, are naturally, I would say, motivated. There are some people that have more natural motivation, i.e., often we have these conversations, right? Of I'm a morning person or I'm not a morning person. For clarification, I am not a morning person. So if you wake me up at 4 a.m., I'm not going to be a happy girl. But the thing that I think is important to remember with that is that, yes, there's motivation and there's a piece to that, right? Some of us are maybe wired a little bit differently for one thing versus another. But the reality is, even the best athletes, even the most high performing CEOs, even the best podcasters have days where they don't want to record a podcast. They have days that they don't want to get up and get out of bed and go to work. They have days they don't want to go to the gym. And so saying that motivation is the difference factor wouldn't be fair because I will tell you, out of all the people that are successful in any field, there's always days that we don't feel motivated. Ultimately, motivation is rooted in emotion. And so our emotions, no matter who you are, have the ability to ride that roller coaster. So the book discusses that the success of anybody with any goal has nothing to do with motivation. It doesn't have to do about how specific the goal was necessarily or what it is that we wanted to do or that we didn't have a big enough goal. It actually is about the fact that we don't have the systems to be successful. And so I want to share some of the takeaways that I got from listening to this and some ways that I kind of, reflected on this for myself. So, first being that 1% improvement. The thing that I know, especially for any of us who are very ambitious or, we're very driven, or maybe, for some of us also who are just a little bit ADHD, we want like overnight. We want this overnight success. We want this overnight momentum. I literally just got off of a call with an incredible client and we were talking about her 2026 goals. And she was like, "Kate, I love this, but honestly, I want to go do this right now." Like it's like this instant I want to press go. And I'm just like her. My brain is very similar in wiring. So I have to recognize that the things that I want are not actually going to be this big radical thing. They're often going to come from the small, little, tiny things that I'm doing every single day and doing those just a bit better, just a little bit more intentional, or just a little bit more focused. So I'll give you an example. For example, with my protein, I was telling you, I was like, okay, what's my fiber goal? What's my carb goal? I used to track macros. So I would track when I was in fitness, like, carbs, fats, proteins and calories and fiber, and I would have like eating windows. And it was this whole complicated thing. And I remember George saying to me, he's like, "Kate, just hit your protein goal. Just start there." And I remember being like, "No, I'm not going to half-ass this goal." And I remember when we first started talking, I was like, "No, I'm going to like go all in." And really ultimately what I was saying is I need a whole new radical plan. And I remember him saying, just focus on the protein. Or if you don't want to focus on the food, just go get your steps. Just go for a walk. And don't even focus on how many steps, just go for a walk. And I remember initially being so frustrated because I thought, like, I don't want to shortchange my goals. I don't want to shortchange my achievement. I don't want to play small. But it wasn't really about playing small. It was about the fact that he was trying to insinuate it's the tiny little pieces of being 1% better that ultimately are over time going to create change. And so think about it this way. If you are somebody who is sitting at your desk all day, every day, and you never move, you maybe have a step count each day of like 1,000 steps. If you just added 500 steps, we're not talking 10K, we're talking 500. Over time, you're taking the 500 extra steps that you're doing every single day and you're timesing that by 365 days this year. So when we think about the compound effect of literally what that would create for you, that would give you an extra 182,000 extra steps just by doing that this year. So when we think about these small little changes, sometimes we kind of discredit them because we start to think, okay, well, what is that going to do? What is just putting up, one extra post each week compared to what I've been doing? What kind of change is that going to make? Or, what is going to bed 1 hour earlier really going to do for my change of my life this year? And I think the downside sometimes when we are driven and we're ambitious is that we're just so go, go, go. And we have these big dreams and these big visions. And we believe that it must be complicated to get there. And so it got me really thinking about the 1% also in connection to simplicity scales, because this is where in scaling businesses, we talk about tweaks and refinement that many people, when they want to scale their business, want to throw out the whole blueprint. They throw out their marketing. They want a whole new offer suite. They want a whole new sales process. And then they get in and I'm like, okay, we're going to tweak this, tweak that. And it's this belief of like, is that really going to make a change? And I literally had a client today who we didn't overhaul her business. And she shared with me today that she had year 1, she made 94,000. Year 2, she made 186,000, I think it was. And year 3, which is 2026, she already has like $240,000 secured in contracts. And this was not like her going from 100,000 to already having like 250,000 secured before she even starts the year. That's not something that came from me being like, let's throw at your business and start over. I'm so insanely proud of her because it was really about her just tweaking the marketing, tweaking the team, tweaking the product suite, tweaking the pricing, tweaking the onboarding. And in doing so, that's where the actual change started to compound over time. So there was this quote that was said in the episode that said, "You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the levels of your systems." Goals determine your direction, systems determine your progress. So, hearing that, you might think, well, because you're like, I got big goals, I got bad systems, right? And that's the light bulb I had as I started thinking about the areas in my life that I want to create change. And I asked myself, do I have a system? Do I actually have a system for that goal? And for some things I've achieved, I reverse engineered the reason I achieved it is because I had a system. And the reason I made momentum is because I had that established. But there's also things that I didn't have a system for. And so it got me thinking about what are those areas that I can start to really focus on creating a system. And that was takeaway 2, which is that winners and losers have the same goals. The people who win in business, the people who win with their goals in health, their marriage, anything that you're working on right now, winners and losers have the same goals. Goals are temporary and they focus on outcomes, not on the process. And I am going to be very transparent. When I started to learn that it was about the process and not the outcome, I became increasingly frustrated because I am very motivated by an outcome. Like I was talking to a different client today and we were saying, she has this goal of going to $1 million cash a year, which I'm very excited by. And I'm happy and honored just to be able to support her. But it was interesting because we were saying, the process of this and process of that. And like that piece is to her, just as it was to me, the process wasn't something I cared about. I was like, I want $1 million business. I want $1 million a year. And I was so focused on get there, get there, get there. And I didn't, in the pursuit of getting there, focus, frankly, enough on the process. And so at number 1, it made it 10 times harder. And number 2, it also meant that when I got to $1 million, I realized that the process of how I got there wasn't sustainable to continue to help me to scale. So I literally kind of almost had to reinvent the business. And I want to give you an example. The system that I had at the time to create $1 million business was rooted around, which I don't recommend, even though it did get me the goal, I don't recommend it, is that it was rooted around, very little sleep, to be honest, pushing on all cylinders at all times. It was rooted around, really early mornings, very late nights working. It was rooted around really, frankly, almost no social life, to be honest. I didn't spend a ton of time with my family at that time. I was not focused in any capacity on my health. So there was just so many other things that had to die in order for this thing to be born. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that those are actually the systems that are required to create that result. And I realized now, even in, coaching clients, that process was a process I chose to get there. And that's because I was so focused on the outcome. It was all outcome. I didn't care about the process. I'm like, I don't care what it looks like. Get me to that goal. Get me to the destination. And I think, if I could go back and tell myself anything, it would be that if you focus more on the process, number 1, you'll probably hit the goal faster. Number 2, you'll hit the goal easier. And third, when you get there, you have something that you can rely on. I also think about this in the analogy of like health, for example, when people are wanting to lose weight or to get fit, you can think about doing like a fast or you can think about doing a cleanse. And sure, can you drink juice for 3 days and lose a little bit of weight? Sure. But you and I both know that to create sustainable change, we got to move our body and we got to nourish our body. And so those are things that happen every single day that just simply cannot be ignored. They cannot be pushed away. And so systems are the daily actions that we need to focus on that actually are the thing that creates the outcome. They are the thing that creates the long-term change. And so if you've ever hit a goal like me and then you regress, it's often because you actually didn't have the right systems in place. And so that's what happened, with my business is I hit, different targets or milestones that I had seen. Again, the outcome, the outcome, the outcome. I had such an emphasis on the outcome that I wanted. And then when I got there, I kind of broke a little bit because I realized that the system of how I got here, if this is what it means to have this goal ongoing, like I don't even know if I can do this. And that's because it required so much of me. Even, in my health journey, I was like, okay, I'm going to eat and get this weight off. I'm going to eat, really intense around my calories and be very specific about my calories. And I'm going to go to the gym 6 days a week and all of these things. But then the reality was I didn't have time to do that. I didn't have time to go to the gym 6 days a week and get 15,000 steps and. And so then I feel like what happens for me is when I don't achieve the goal, when I don't achieve the thing, I start to get frustrated. And it's like, that's not because you don't have the potential to achieve your goal. It's not because it's, not the goal for you or that's not possible for you. Oftentimes, we're not hitting our goals because we have not set ourselves up for success to have the systems in place to be able to achieve them. So there was an example provided in the podcast that had talked about the fact that, for example, say you're a busy mom and you have the goal of, I want to start working out, or I want to start, going to the gym more. Or maybe if it's something even simpler than leaving the house, it could be, wanting to meditate in the mornings and spending 20 minutes meditating. Well, if you have 3 children that you have to get out the door to be at school by 8 a.m., it might be a little bit of the wrong time in your system to do that goal. And so when I started to hear them break down examples of systems, it made me realize that our systems are something that also we get to create. And we have to acknowledge, is the way that we set up our system actually designed to make us successful? So for myself, one of the things that created momentum recently is the fact that my system I used to believe was going to be that I would get up and do workouts at 6 a.m. Remember when I said I wasn't a morning person? So I'm a night owl. I always have been. And I always I can stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning and not think twice about it. So when I thought about getting up at even 4 a.m., 5 a.m., that no matter what dressing you put on it is not a flavor that I'm into because I'm not a morning person. And so I was like, okay, how can I make this work for me? So I realized I can get up and, dive in, do my morning routine and dive into work. But the thought of working out upon opening my eyes was not something that interested me. On the contrast, though, when I started moving my workouts to the evening in my system, meaning all my work is done, close your laptop, you're done for the day, your responsibilities with your CEO hat are done, put your personal hat back on and get into your routine. When I started to do that, I realized I had way more consistency happening. I had way more rhythm in my day. And so I also think the goals versus systems is important because we have to acknowledge that just because you and the person next to you have the same goal doesn't mean that the single woman who has no kids and all her time is her own, that person doesn't have the same system to achieve that goal as you do. And so I think it's important for us to recognize that the systems we create also need to be tailored to us, our lifestyle, our goals, our values, our personality. There are things that are real, very, very real logistical realities. For example, as a parent that you navigate. So when you see Barbara on the internet telling you come on, get up in the morning and get working out. It's like, hey, that's not my reality. And so we beat ourselves up about not achieving things thinking, okay, well, I'm not motivated enough. I'm not, determined enough. I'm not inspired enough. No, you have 2 to 3 kids who are running around in the morning, and that might not be the time that you need to meditate. Maybe you need to meditate before bed, and you can give yourself an intentional space where it makes more sense in your system. So I really remember listening to that piece and saying, okay, is there any area in my life where I'm trying to take someone else's system, someone else's approach, and integrate it as my own? And is there a way for me to be more personalized, more intentional about that system for me to get better results and better outcomes? So that's kind of the piece of the goal versus the system. So ask yourself, the goal you have, what system do you have created, if any? And 2, is the system something that you've been given by somebody else? Or is this a system that you would say actually is supportive for you, your lifestyle, and your current reality? Now, takeaway number 3 that I saw was that there are identity-based habits. And this is basically the core philosophy of the entire book. So there's 3 layers to behavior change. Number 1, the outcome, which is the thing that you want to achieve. Number 2, the processes, what you actually do repeatedly. And 3rd, which is the identity, who you believe you are. Most people focus on what they want to achieve and not who they want to become. The habits that you have are a vote for your identity. And this is something that I talk about in other episodes about the difference of the player versus the playbook is one of the ways that I speak to this. The other way is also about the fact, George had said in an episode, you don't have the business you want because you haven't become the person to run it. And that quote is such an embodiment of this core principle that it's talking about, which is that there's a difference between saying, I'm going to go for a run and I'm a runner. There's a difference between saying, I'm going to try to make $100,000 a month, or I want to embrace, or I am, or I desire to be a 7-figure earner or a 7-figure CEO. One is a identity and one is an outward goal or a North Star that we're going for. And so every habit that you have is a vote for the person that you want to become. And so the goal is to stack the votes. And this was a really big lesson for me in business. I had a mentor who I loved his direct coaching. And I remember I told him I wanted a 7-figure business. And he said, basically in a matter of words, that he didn't know that I deserved it. And I kind of initially obviously had, as anyone's reaction would be like, "What do you mean?" And I'm thinking, I'm paying for coaching. Tell me I deserve it, right? But that line completely changed my life and my business. Him being direct and being honest with me, because what it did is he was giving me a kind of mindset check to say, hey, just because you have a goal of 7 figures doesn't mean you're the person who you need to be to have a 7-figure business. And that was because he told me I'm not the person to run it yet. So how could I have a 7-figure business if I'm not in the mindset, in the identity, in the behavior, in the habits of a 7-figure earner? And it was the best call out that changed my life because it made me realize I was not operating in the identity of the person I needed to become before I became it. So, like, for example, when someone wants to become an Olympic athlete and they desire that as their goal, they need to train like an Olympian before they are one. They need to rest and to recover like an Olympian before they are one. They got to be consistent like an Olympian in their training before they become one. So there's sometimes this disconnect, I feel like, that we have as business owners, that we believe that simply because we want a goal, we will achieve it. Instead of asking yourself, are you the kind of person who has the identity of that, to have the habits of that, to therefore have the reps of it to achieve the outcome? And it's big in business because many people in business want to scale a business, but they don't have the habits. And as a result, truthfully, they don't have the identity that they need to achieve that goal, which is why they're always like, what's going on with the strategy? What's going on with the strategy? I'm like, the strategy may not be the issue. Sometimes it's not the manual or the buttons, it's the user. And that's something that I know from this process of the 3 layers of behavior change: the outcome you want to achieve, processes you do repeatedly, and who you believe you are. And so I want you to think back to your goal. Think back to that thing that you're looking to achieve and ask yourself, who do I believe I am in that bucket? What is the identity that I attribute to my goal? And for me in the health bucket, I I had a lot of excuses and I had a lot of identity around, like, I'm like, "Oh, I've always been skinny fat." That's like, I've always had just, this has always been the way that I am. It's fine. There was that. I had the second, which was like, this is 30. This is 30. This is just how it is at 30. I had these beliefs about what were true. And I truthfully had a belief, to be very honest, about the fact that, like, I always have this goal. I always struggle with this. I'm always inconsistent. And for the last several years, have always struggled with, this is just how I am with this bucket now. And so what I realized was, to have the identity, I had to show myself through evidence, which are the habits, that I was embodying it before I became it. And so we often hear this kind of aspect or this quote of like fake it till you make it, which on one hand, I don't agree with it if you're like renting Lamborghinis and like private plane studios and stuff, like not my flavor. But I do think there's an aspect to that which is true, that you have to believe it and embody it before you ever will become it. And that is something that does not change no matter what your goal is. Even if you are somebody that is not innately living a healthy lifestyle right now, you need to embody and believe and get into the identity of that of a healthy day-to-day person to start living and taking the steps and habits to that life. And I realized that in any goal that I had that I was successful in, it always started with me getting crystal clear on identity and asking myself, who is that person that I tell myself I am versus what I do? So again, the distinction being I'm a runner versus I run, right? Or I'm someone who runs often versus I am a runner. There's a distinction between those that adopt the identity and their consistency versus those that just see the outcome or see the action and see that as the identifying factor. So, looking at remembering 3 levels of behavior change. Number 1, the outcome. What do you want to achieve? 2, what you do repeatedly. And 3, the identity of who you believe you are. All of these are the key aspects of behavior change. Okay. So the outcome you want, the process to achieve it, and the belief of the identity of who you believe that you are. And identity change, because some people will say, well, Kate, like, I've never been more unhealthy. Saying the affirmation of like, I'm healthy does not necessarily make me healthy. Or potentially for me, back in the day, I said, okay, saying I'm a 7-figure earner and the affirmation in the mirror is not going to make me a 7-figure earner. But it's not about affirmations. This is the thing. It's not about affirmations. It's actually about giving yourself evidence via action. Becoming the identity of the person you want is not about affirmations. It's about giving yourself evidence via action. Meaning, the 7-figure business owner that you want to become is not a matter of you being like, I'm a 7-figure business owner in the mirror every single day. It's a matter of you putting in the reps that are that of a 7-figure business owner. It's you putting in the reps that say, these are the habits that are that of a 7-figure business owner. These are the decisions. This is how they wake up. This is how they operate in conflict. This is how they deal with difficult situations. This is how they deal with consistency. This is how they deal with motivation. You are wanting to embody through action every single day until you become. And the disconnect that many will experience, and you may be experiencing this in some of your goals right now, is the desire for a certain outcome without the actions or evidence to tell yourself that you are that thing. You will build the identity of a 7-figure earner oftentimes long before you actually become a 7-figure earner. And that's what happened to me. I revamped my morning routine. I revamped my evening routine. I revamped my circles of people I was around. I revamped my regulation and being able to handle different levels of stress or stimuli around me. I revamped almost every area of my life to try to give myself as much alignment in my habits and my execution and my evidence to the person that I wanted to become. And so I want to invite you to think about, and just for a second, to tap into what is that goal that you want? What is that thing that you're looking to achieve? Okay. And if you are tapping into the identity of that person, okay, so maybe it's the healthy person, maybe it's the wealthy person, maybe it's, the not stressed out version, right? Whatever it may be, that thing that you're wanting to become, who is she? Who is that person? And what does she do in correlation with your goal? What does her routine look like? What do her habits look like? What are the steps that she takes? And the goal here is to get crystal clear on what those answers are. Because if you want to become a specific identity for yourself, so again, like I'm not just running, I'm a runner. You want to ask yourself, if I'm a runner, what do I do Monday to Friday? If I'm a runner, how do I recover? If I'm a runner, what do I eat? If I'm a runner, how do I sleep? When do I sleep? How long do I sleep? Those are where you will start to uncover the actions that will correlate you to the identity of the person that you really deeply desire to become. Now, the habit piece was obviously the piece that everybody wants to know, hence the topic, atomic habits. So I want to break down the 4-step loop that they talk about when it comes to any habit that we experience. Okay. So first is the cue, which is the trigger. 2 is the craving, which is the desire. Third is the response, which is the action. And fourth is the reward, which is the benefit. So I'm going to give you an example, okay, to walk you through what these 4 steps look like. Number 1 is the cue, which, remember, that's the trigger. That's the thing that causes us to go into the habit. As a, example to run through these could be like you're feeling anxious, you're feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling overstimulated, you're stressed, or you're bored. Okay. So you're having an emotional dysregulation in some capacity, might be your cue. And that cue is something that causes you to go to step 2, which is considered the craving. That's the desire. So when you're, let's just say, stressed, you're anxious, your craving is you don't crave junk food, you crave comfort or pleasure. Okay. So often, a lot of us, like even for me, one of the things when we were growing up, which is part of what I've had to heal with my relationship with food, is that when we were growing up, my family had a very messy divorce. There was a lot of stress happening for many years in my life. And so, with that, when my mom would be stressed out, she'd be like, seeing us stressed out as kids, and she'd be like, great, we're all going to go get ice cream. Right. So she's a single mom of 4. She's stressed out. We're stressed out because the divorce was very messy. And so as a result, we're all going to go get ice cream. Here's what unintentionally, she didn't mean to, but she reinforced, is stress is cured by food. So what ended up happening was the cue would be that I was stressed out, I was anxious, I was overwhelmed. And the first thing that I would crave is sugar. I'm like, I want an ice cream, I want a cake, I want a croissant, I want a hot chocolate, I want something sugary and sweet. I want food. And literally, I'm not even joking, even now, I remember I had just this past year, I had a situation, and I was really, really stressed out about it. And I was like, I need cake. And someone was like, what? And I'm like, I really need a cake. And I remember thinking, that's not a normal response to this stressor. But it was because I didn't really want cake. It wasn't about the cake. It was about the fact that this craving, this desire provided me comfort. It provided me a dopamine spike. It made me feel better. And that thing doesn't have to be food. It could also be when you're stressed and anxious. Do you binge TikTok and you scroll for 2 hours and you kind of go into this doom scrolling habit? Are you someone when you get stressed and anxious that you shut down and you just kind of rot in bed for hours at a time? The other thing, which is also for some of you high achievers can be also the case, when you're stressed, you don't slow down, you go into overdrive where you're like, I'm stressed out. This happens to me too. I'm going to clean the entire house. And I would start organizing random drawers I haven't opened in 9 months. It's still a habit because when you have the activator of the cue, the emotional state that is impacted in this situation, the goal of the next step of the craving is to give you the thing that you ultimately desire. And so the desire is not about the next step that you take. So when I'm anxious and I go to grab, as I said, a piece of cake or, get an ice cream or something like that, it's not about the ice cream. It's not about the cake. It's about the fact of how that cake, that ice cream makes me feel when I'm done with it. And so that's the real reason we go to the desire, the real reason that we go to that craving. Now, the third is what our response is. Okay. So step 1 is the cue. That's the trigger, the activator that causes us to crave something, which is step 2, the craving. What is the actual thing that you desire after the cue has happened and you've become activated? Now, third, now that you know the desire, the thing that you want, then comes the action, which is the fact that you want to eat a cookie, you want to have a piece of cake. And there's 2 factors that decide whether a response is going to happen: motivation and friction. If the habit is too complicated or too exhausting or inconvenient, it won't lead to action because simplicity will always win. So I want to break this down. Okay, I'm sitting watching TV. I've become stressed and anxious. Instant light bulb goes off. I want chocolate. And so this cue happens. I now crave chocolate and I go to act. If I have 7 chocolate bars sitting in my cupboard at home, there's a pretty high likeliness that I'm going to take that chocolate and eat it. Now, think on the contrast. I'm on the couch and Uber Eats didn't do us any favor when they started delivering incredible food right to our door. But I'm sitting on the couch, I'm stressed, I'm anxious. Again, cue. 2, I go into the craving, which is the chocolate, but I go to my cupboard now and there's no chocolate in the cupboard. I have no sweets, in fact, in the house. When I go to search the freezer, nothing there. Go search the cupboard, nothing there. Nothing in the fridge. So now I have this moment where I will have to get in my car, drive to the store, go get something, bring it home, eat it in order to cue the craving. So we know that the more difficult that you make the ability to respond to the craving, the better chance you're going to have oftentimes of helping you to overcome it. So it's oftentimes, if they are working with someone who has a severe addiction to something, they will say to try to limit the amount that you're around it. And that's because you have an easy access to the thing that is your craving. So if you have an easy access to it, it makes it very easy to fall into that habit. Whereas for most of us, if something's difficult and we want it, we don't necessarily always go do it because it's difficult. This also, though, works on the inverse as well, which I'll explain in a second. The last step is reward, which is that you now satisfy the craving and it teaches your brain that the habit, whether the actual habit is worth remembering. And with this, we actually see the reward system happen, right? So remember, I have the cue, I'm anxious, I eat the chocolate, I, respond to it by eating it. And now I've got dopamine. So my body goes, oh, okay, this feels good. Let's do this again. So we have a reward system that's built in, which ultimately, basic psychology reinforces the behavior. Negative consequences typically delay behavior. Increased rewards ultimately support behavior change. So, what we know is that when you have a reward, even from a really bad habit, so this is not to say that the reward is always something healthy for you. The reward, of me sitting and eating 7 chocolate bars is the dopamine. Doesn't mean that doing so is good for me. It just means that I am getting some kind of reward from it. And in any habit that you're struggling with or any habit that you want to create, there has to be reward. So you might think, well, Kate, why am I scrolling TikTok for 3 hours? There's a reward in that. Your dopamine center is getting activated nonstop when you're scrolling online. And so when you remove the reward, right, it's a little bit less appealing to your brain to go do it because what's the benefit of us doing so? We're not getting anything from this. So with this, I want to share something that is such a simple explanation, but it's so powerful. Bad habits are centered in feel good now, accept the cost later. Good habits are centered in pay the cost now and pay later. Okay. So bad habits, feel good now, cost later. Good habits are cost now and basically feel good later. Okay. You'll notice in this that there's the ability to postpone satisfaction. And for all of you ambitious ladies, because I'm one of you and I have the same wiring in me, this is very difficult because I love a good dopamine spike as much as the next person. And I love quick wins and I love fast momentum and I love, quick moving anything. Like I am always like, yes, momentum, a win, an energy. Like I love to follow the positive energy. But that's not always going to be there. So we have to have the ability to, as a result, have upfront cost for long-term gain. Bad habits are typically those who pay into, this idea of, oh, I want the short-term gain, but they often don't have long-term wins as a result. So the thing that is important for us to recognize, I want to go back to when we talked about levels of friction. So when you have a natural response to doing something, if it's very difficult for you to do, even though you enjoy it, so again, back to the chocolate bar, if I really want that chocolate bar and it's very difficult for me to have, I also may not go to the store to go get it because it's like, oh, I really want chocolate, but I'm not in the mood to go do A, B, C, D, E to go get it. The same thing is true on the inverse, which is that if you are someone who's trying to start a healthy habit and you make it really complicated, it also creates a barrier to doing something good. So just like friction is a resistance to doing something bad, friction can also be a part of doing something good as a habit. So, meaning if I set a goal where I remember I was saying before when I was looking at, my food or trying to be more healthy when it comes to my food choices, if I make it really, really difficult and complex, then I'm actually going to be adding friction to what I'm doing versus just saying, make a log of what you ate today to just create a level of awareness for yourself. That's a simplicity versus a level of complexity that ultimately is friction added to my goal. So, another thing that I noted is that a hack is you must make a reward immediate, even if artificial, to close the loop. So, one of the ways that I do this reward system, I'm still not, when I used to be really into working out, I like got dopamine from the workouts and I would be so excited to go to the gym and I was like super into it. I'm waiting for the day that comes back, but I'm not there yet. So, now what I have literally on my wall in my washroom is I have a tracker that's basically like a monthly planner, and it has my food goal for the day, my protein goal, it has my step goal, and it has my workout, yes or no. And it's not to judge myself, like it's not to say like, "Oh, you did good that day and you did bad that day." And it's not about any of that. It's about the fact that I'm seeing my level of consistency. It's an awareness of I put a check mark basically on every single day that I do what I said I was going to do. And I put an X on the days that I don't do what I said I was going to do. So with that, all I'm looking to do is create a streak. I'm like, okay, great. I want to have like a bunch of check marks. I'm meaning I did all the things that I said I was going to do today. So it's important to also recognize that when I do that, that to me is a reward. At the end of the day, I'm like, man, I don't really want to fill out this tracker and put like no workout, no food, no steps, right? There's an aspect of I want to kind of keep up my streak and be consistent. Businesses also do this. For example, like My Fitness Pal, if anyone uses that, My Fitness Pal, when you put in your food each day of what you're eating, they will literally be like, hey, you've hit a 6-day streak, you hit a 7-day streak, and it will literally tell you how consistent you've been. I don't need that streak, right? Like that's not something that I asked for, but what they're doing is they're creating a reward system with their app. They're creating a reward system that says, hey, come back. Don't break your streak, come back. And so that helps a lot to help people to have a reward to continue a behavior, which for most people using MyFitnessPal is centered around their health. So in this episode, they discuss that you cannot delete a habit, you can only replace it with a new one, which ultimately is with a new response. So remember, we've got Q, I'm stressed or anxious. 2, the craving, which is I want chocolate. The only thing that we can change is the response, which is what do I actually do after wanting chocolate and feeling stressed. So what I started to do to help myself to rewire this is I actually started sounds really weird, but I actually started to eat cucumbers. So I was like, I knew that every time I was stressed, I would go and get sugary things. And so now I swap it with something that is basically blank calories. It's like a Coke Zero, or I have a cucumber or something along that line. I replace it with something else that is a different type of food, but it's a food that doesn't necessarily have any calories to it. Now, with that, I also could, if I wanted to, which I had another friend of mine did, she was having and talking to me about her relationship with eating. Another one of my friends, when she felt the cue for this, would go in and she would like have again the cue of anxiety to the desire or craving to eat sugar or carbs. And so what she did is she would go and she would get steps in. She's like, I would go and I would literally do 3 laps around my block. And after that, that would be my response because I'm trying to rewire the behavior. So after that, she was like, I would go and reward myself basically by doing something fun. So like she would instantly state change. And over time, it meant as a result, she didn't really crave anything anymore when she was stressed. And that's because she broke the pattern. So the thing that's important to remember though is that you do have to replace the response. You can't just be like, I'm done with this habit, right? You need to replace it because otherwise you'll fall back onto your system, which right now your system is something that may not support you. So they discuss in this the 4 laws of behavior change. So I want to share those with you. Law 1, you have to make it obvious, i.e., the cue, with habit tracking or scorecards. You cannot change a habit that you do not notice. You cannot change a habit that you do not notice. So, this is also why that tracker is really helpful for me because when I see that I have these, check marks on these days, I have an actual obvious awareness of my consistency. I have an obvious awareness of my achievements versus if you, for example, don't have that, then it means that you might not know how many days you skipped the gym. You might not know how many days you didn't put up a post this week. You might not know how many times you didn't do something because you have no visibility of that thing. So, this is also something we talk about in business. We talk about what gets measured gets managed. And that's true of any goal that you have. If you do not measure it, there's no way to really manage your consistency with it. And as a result, there's no way to manage your ability to achieve it as well. Law 2, make it attractive, i.e., the craving. Make it attractive. We repeat behaviors that feel good. So pair something you want to do with something you need to do. So, another habit that I did until the last 2 years, I didn't drink water. I'm going to be really honest. I don't know. I was a raisin. I did not drink water. I don't know how I've survived. I'm going to be honest. I don't know how I survived. I didn't drink water. So, I remember I got a Stanley and I was like, okay, I have to get into this habit of drinking water. So what I did is every single day when I would go and I'd make my coffee at the same time, I would habit stack and I would fill my Stanley at the exact same time. So before I would drink the coffee, I would try to drink the Stanley before I would go on to anything else. And so that over time turned me from raisin into a fish because now I am just drinking tons of water. And every time basically that I, go to make a coffee, I'm filling it up. Anytime now that I'm on a break, which is another habit that I stacked, any break that I have in my schedule and I label my breaks as green in my schedule. Anytime I hit a green block, I have to check my water. So I started to pair these different pieces together. And I found that that really made me, especially with the coffee. I love coffee. I am obsessed with coffee. So because of that, I knew that I enjoyed making my coffee. So naturally, if I stack my Stanley on top of it and filling my water, I'm not going to have a hard time integrating that. Now, business wise, there are things that you like to do and there's things that you don't like to do. So for me, I love listening, for example, to a podcast in the morning. So sometimes now what I'll do is I'll literally put on a podcast and I'll do, Slack messages or emails or catch up basically on admin while doing that. I don't love doing admin work personally, but I do find that if I make it an enjoyable experience, I can habit stack the two together and make it a really fun thing to do versus ugh, I have to answer, all these emails and backlog. So, with that, law 3, make it easy. The easier it is, the more likely it sticks. Lay out, for example, if you're someone who wants to work out in the morning, lay out your clothes in advance, reduce your friction. For example, if it's a matter of, I really want to read more, don't tell yourself that you're going to read the entire book or 3 chapters tonight. Tell yourself you're going to read 3 pages. Start small with the goal and remove the friction that you may be creating for yourself in being able to achieve that goal. And with that, there is in this making it easy, there is a rule. It's the 2-minute rule, which is any new habit should take less than 2 minutes to start. So, for example, if you want to go to the gym, going to the gym is not the step. It's putting your shoes on, meaning the thing that you actually have to do to actually start that goal needs to be fast. So, for example, I try to do 10,000 steps a day or 10 kilometers a day, which I think is 15,000 steps or something like that. And when I had that goal last January, I was like, okay, how am I going to do this? So I have to walk my dogs every day. So what I did is I literally laid out my shoes, and I am not even kidding you. I would wake up, I would put on my big oversized coat, sometimes, most times still in my pajamas, and I would literally put my shoes on and I would go for a walk. And I'm not even awake 9 times out of 10 until halfway through the walk. And so I would wake up and really get, awake basically during the walk itself. But the thing is, there was no resistance. I literally woke up, I brushed my teeth, I go down, I put my shoes on, and we go. And so I removed the, oh, but I gotta get ready first. And oh, but I gotta get a coffee. And then I gotta wash my face. And then I gotta get the dogs, let them out and feed them breakfast. It was like all this resistance. Just put your shoes on and go. And I realized that making it simpler is actually what made it easy for me to do. Now, because I don't struggle with the consistency of walking, I don't find I have any issue with it. So it hasn't been difficult for me. I can have anything resistance wise in front of me almost. And, I'm able to be consistent. But at the beginning, it was something that was really difficult for me to do. I couldn't get the motivation to go walking. And so, 2-minute rule, any new habit that you want to integrate should take less than 2 minutes to get started. So, the habit is not going to the gym. The habit is get your shoes on, go for a walk, or potentially get your shoes on, get in the car. Law 4, make it satisfying, i.e., give a reward, and immediate rewards matter. Never miss twice. Once is an accident, twice is actually the start of a new habit. I'm going to remind you of that one. When you miss something once, it can be an accident. If you miss it twice, it's actually the start of a new habit. I wanted for this one just give an example for business, because oftentimes I see this within business, which is people will say like, "Oh yeah, I didn't get around to it," or "Oh yeah, I didn't have time for that," or "Yeah, I'm working on X." And there's kind of just this like the lack of consistency is like it's day after day, it's week after week, it's constant, it's nonstop. And people are like, "Oh, it's an off week or it was an off day." But if the off week or the off day in your business is basically a lifestyle, meaning it's constantly happening, then it's not really necessarily a one-off accident of, oh, you had like one-off, weird day or you had this one-off situation. It's actually something that you've more often than not made into a new habit of inconsistency. So it is something that you want to go back to rewire to be a habit of consistency for yourself. So with this, let's address how to reverse breaking a bad habit. So first, make it invisible. Remove your triggers and change your environment. So remember I said, when someone's really struggling with addiction, they will say, don't go near your triggers. The same thing is true when it comes to anything. If you're somebody who spends a lot of money when you're in a mall, don't go to the mall anymore. If you're somebody who has a little bit of a knack for online shopping, don't go onto the online sites to go shopping anymore. For me, one of the things that really helped me is like I try to stock the house with really healthy snacks that are like ready to eat at a moment's notice. Because then if I have a choice and I'm kind of like scrambling in between calls for whatever reason, and I have choice 1, which is like a turkey stick to eat, or choice 2, which is cupcakes, which one do you think I'm going to pick? Right? Like that to me was something that changed everything, especially because I just found that I was go, 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 and whatever was accessible is what I did. So I realized what was accessible was going to be my action. And so I wanted to ensure that things that were my action or were accessible were the things that I actually wanted for me and for my future. So if you want to reverse something that's a bad habit, number 1, you have to make it invisible, right? So we can't have this be something that's a constant trigger in our environment. And with this, you have to try as much as possible to remove from your environment. 2, you want to make the habit that you have that you're struggling to overcome unattractive. So you want to actually start to frame it as a long-term cost. You need to talk and see that habit as something that is in fact negative. So I would say most of us don't sit with our habits enough to actually see the impact that those are creating for us. And because of that, we will oftentimes repeat the negativity because we don't actually take a second to reflect on truly how negative it is. And so I would say the long-term cost and talking about the true impact of your habit, talk about the negative consequence of your habit. Those are important practices because those are actually the thing that will be the catalyst for you connecting the thing you're doing to negativity versus making it neutral and making it okay. Third is make it difficult, add friction. So, as I said, you can remove the trigger, but also with that, you can also try to find a way to make it really, really difficult to get. So, for example, James Clear in this podcast talked about the fact that he was trying to have more focused work time. And he realized that his phone, he left it plugged in the morning until X time. And he had noted that he would go in his office on the other side of the house and he added friction, which means he couldn't take his phone off the charger till X time. And he'd have to go across the house to go use his charger. So he was like, just the added friction of the fact that if I wanted to like check social media, check my text messages, check anything. If I wanted to check it, I had to go walk to the other side of the house in order to be able to do that. And so he's like, with that friction, I realized I didn't go as much. Whereas when my phone was right beside me, I would see a notification or I would see something come in and I would instantly check it. And so this speaks to the aspect of friction. If you make something difficult, then it's going to be harder for you to do, which means naturally your brain's going to really need that thing to go above and beyond. And so again, mine was removing the trigger of having it in the house, but my removing of having, tons of chocolate in the house was removing the trigger, yes, but it was also making it way more friction, which means if in the event that I must have chocolate, I have to go to the store and drive there and go get it or spend money to have someone deliver it in order to be able to receive it. So with that, make it difficult. So number one, make it invisible. Number two, make it unattractive to do. So talk about the impact and negative consequence. Third, make it difficult, which is adding friction. And lastly, make it unsatisfying. Make there be a consequence to this. Maybe even an accountability partner that sees you in the execution of this. If you can make it unsatisfying to do, you're not typically going to be as incentivized to do it. And that's because we know our brains are deeply wired and rooted in reward. So, the ultimate takeaway of this is as well, you are not going to see progress immediately. And a lot of people quit because they don't see instant results. And so, the analogy they gave was like ice melting. So, when you see a piece of ice and the ice is not water on the counter yet, it doesn't mean that it's not melting. It's just not melted. And I think that that's an important thing for us to recognize is like, just because for you and your goal, you haven't completely kicked this overnight, or you have not, maybe you're trying to do a positive habit and you haven't seen that positive habit generate results. You wanting the overnight results could very well be the thing that is causing the whole thing not to work anyways. So just because you can't see it, just because you can't feel it, the thing that you're doing, remember that 1%. Just because you're doing something 1% better and it's not feeling that like this kind of like catastrophic change, or it's not feeling like this, massive catalyst of I'm a new person and I woke up different today. Just because you don't have that doesn't mean that you're in fact not making change. What it means is that the change that you're making is a 1% increment. You're doing what actually creates change, which is you're creating small habits and you're using those small habits to over time compound to help you to get the outcome that you want. And so I want to invite you to look at one of two things today. I want you to invite you, number one, to listen to that full podcast. If you've listened to this one and that one, there's no way you won't know how to make or undo a habit of yours. But if you want even more on this, number one, I would definitely recommend going and getting a copy of Atomic Habits. It is a fantastic book. It is an incredible bestseller, and you will not be sorry if you read that. Two, they have a fantastic episode below for you if you want to listen to that, which goes in even more detail of the things that I talked about today. And third, I want to invite you and give you an invitation to take this thought process, take this kind of activation, this spark, and to say to yourself, what is something that I want to create as a habit for myself? What is maybe instead something I want to release as a habit? And I want you to go back to these cues, these I guess I should say stages, which is number one, the cue. You either want to create the cue and make sure that you have a cue for this habit, i.e., put the shoes at the door, or You also want to potentially remove the cue, which is, again, removing the triggers in your environment if you're trying to undo it. You want to make sure that you have clarity of what is the goal that I'm working toward, what is the goal that I'm trying to undo, and how am I going to use this 4-step process to help me to make change in that as fast as possible. Most importantly, I want to invite you that this is not something that you need to ponder on. It's not something you need to think on. It's not something you need to just, oh, I had this podcast. I'm going to sit on this for 2 weeks and think about what my plan could be. I want to invite you to make a small 1% change right away. So, if you are wanting to get more steps in a day, could you put your shoes on and go do so? Could you put your shoes by the door to do so tonight? If you are somebody, for example, who wants to remove, like me, the trigger of going to sugar when stressed, could you potentially remove the triggers in your environment at home? Could you say, hey, I'm throwing out the chocolate after this podcast? Like, could you do something right now, listening to today, that would allow you to have already created, just by listening and instantly going and doing it, already have created 1% more likeliness of either number one, achieving a goal, or number two, undoing a habit? So the action you take is going to do one of two things today. Well, technically three. First, inaction. You'll do nothing. You'll be like, that was inspiring. Yeah, I should think about that. That would be cool. And you won't do anything. Two, you'll be the person who says, okay, what was the habit I'm trying to work on? What's an instant step that I could take to give myself a cue that's very, very low friction? Keep it simple. Or third, what is a habit that I want to undo that is a trigger in my environment that I can support myself and get rid of to help myself with that habit? I want to invite you to do that because it's very easy to listen to a podcast. It's very easy to read a book even and feel really inspired and feel very activated and do absolutely nothing with the information that you just learned. So I want to challenge you to not just think about this, not to ruminate on it, but to do something about it. And so with that being said, I hope today was helpful for you. Please be sure to listen to the podcast below in the show notes. We'll have it linked for you wherever you are listening or watching. But more than anything, I want to say thank you so much for tuning in today. And if you want to share, I feel like I shared a lot about my sugar addiction today, but if you are somebody who also wants to maybe share either number one, a habit that you're going for, or two, a habit that you in listening today are committed to undoing, I would love, as I talked about, accountability is huge. I would love to witness you in that. So if you are someone who wants to claim that, state that, and have someone else who knows that to be true for your goals for 2026, I would love to be that person for you. So my DMs are open if you want to chat or connect and share your goals for 2026. But with all that being said, I will see you in the next episode. And as always, stay ambitious.